Memory vapor is an environment in which we observe cosmic rays. It is an adaptation of a cloud chamber, which was the first breed of particle accelerator. And we also accelerate these cosmic rays as one would in a particle accelerator by means of a high voltage electric field. What makes this piece quite different from the scientific experiment is that we turn this supersaturated gas into a dynamic prism with a white laser sheet. By this means, the particle trails become far more observable, extending essentially our palette of depth perception through this this chromatic palette.
Well, we don't even like the term particle very much, but what you see in this environment, it sort of makes an image of a particle passing by, because the only thing we see is a trail, and the entity that leaves the trail is too small to see on such a scale. However, the trails themselves are quite varied in speed and shape, and sometimes they come in very weird morphologies, and immediately after the same morphology will repeat, like for example V's or 6, and it's a real particle zoo. So
so if you do accept that that there are particles, because indeed there are various interpretations of our quantum reality, but here we observe muons predominantly and electrons. However, there are also plenty of positrons, antiprotons if we're very lucky, as well as protons. And they're coming from every possible direction in outer space. However, it is also important to note that as soon as any of these cosmic rays hit our atmosphere, they break up into billions of other charge-carrying entities, and in order to get a grasp of their origins, we can indeed, just as in a particle accelerator or a bubble chamber or a cloud chamber, we can figure out their respective speeds and masses by their morphology and by the way in which they appear and disappear.
I had a very visceral reaction in my body. So it was sort of like when you take very strong medicine and your body immediately reacts, or so it was like immediate reshuffling of matter in my body, and I felt it more on a kind of micro level of my body than emotional level. And of course, because what you're looking at is such a subtle reality comparing to our level of objects we operate with, of course you can't help but admire it as something beautiful and very subtle. But the reason we call it memory is because particles, subatomic entities, so any entity behavior on such a scale, on a quantum scale, possesses the quality of entanglement, which is sort of like consciousness of other. And we believe that awareness, consciousness does indeed start on such a level of the fabric of the universe.
Well, as soon as you have anything moving at the speed of light or near the speed of light, there are all kinds of elasticities that arise, namely there is a truncation of time, and curiously, in the case of this installation, you have another layer of this truncation just simply by virtue of the fact that the trails themselves appear and disappear much more slowly than the particles themselves, because these condensation trails are gigantic in comparison. So there are actually many different time scales that we're observing and that we are inferring through this conscious act of observation. The thing is that, okay, so let's imagine that depending upon it depends of course on their mass, and it also depends on what kind of entities that they are.
And what they are flying through. So this environment is extremely slow. So this thing slows everything down very, very, very much. That's why we are able to see it. So because the environment is very, very dense, because there is the saturated vapors of alcohol plus very low temperature, all these factors slow these very fast entities very much. Of course, their speed is close to the speed of light in vacuum, but there is no vacuum here on our planet, so as soon as they enter the atmosphere, they are slowed down and kind of they break apart the other molecules, other stable molecules that would never leave such a trail. They break them into multiple pieces and bits, and then so it's another slowdown, and every level of this particle shower is a new slowdown, and this is the final slowdown. So we are almost pulling them on their tails, so we have a chance to notice them. Now I think it's used more as a part of learning about the history of science and how certain concepts developed. In Switzerland, there is the biggest cloud chamber in the world, which is 3 by 3 meters. So it's 6 times bigger than the one we have here. And yeah, it's just for public view. So there is enough beauty and amazement at looking at this experiment, even if you cannot derive any new data. But the contemporary generation of cosmic ray observatories, their design is really mind-boggling, because they take huge. One of them exists in Latin America. Mm-hmm. I don't remember. Auger Observatory, and it's a huge territory of many like hundreds or thousands square kilometers, with this underground
basins of water, and they take the three-dimensional image of the particles with radars, with the Cherenkov radiation in the water, and so they are gigantic in size, and they kind of try to trace the three-dimensional path of the particle shower starting from early atmosphere. So the design is much more sophisticated today, but they're looking at the same message coming from space. Yeah, they're actually looking at these same charge carriers leave traces of ultraviolet light in water. So we can't unfortunately see them, but with the special CCD that can see into the ultraviolet spectrum, we can see not only trajectories occurring in terms of a relatively planar layer, in this case of supersaturated gas, but they can actually see quite a bit more directionality along vertical and other orientations.
It was, the experiment was created with an idea to recreate the process of formation of clouds, because the scientist who did it, he liked, according to a legend, he liked mountain walks and he liked to observe various optical phenomena that occur in the mountains, such as glories and halos, and I'm sure there are many non-described ones. Once we were told by a very interesting artist, Henrik Weiser, who is from Innsbruck, so he is from Alps, and he said, you have to come in February on the full moon to visit me, because there is a very special optical effect, and knowing our work, he knew that this is from our alien. So he said, I cannot name it, I don't know what it is, but it only happens in February on the full moon, and you have to go to a certain elevation, and there is some sparkling of the crystals that is very special and not like anything else. So that is why the cloud chamber was set up, and that's what the cold and alcohol are doing. They are forming clouds on a kind of on a tabletop experiment, and of course there was no any kind of idea that some kind of trails will appear there.
Yeah, Wilson did not know that he was going to give birth to the domain of particle physics, but this surprise led to many other surprises, of course, and in some ways you could say that the Large Hadron Collider is a descendant of the Wilson chamber. We don't believe that there is such a pronounced division between science, art, and philosophy. The mysteries of nature are the primary impetus.
Just like there are no divisions of disciplines in nature, and this of course there is institutional science, there is institutional art, and there are divisions, but on the level of a human practicing or engaging mentally or with their senses in such pursuit, the differences could be very, very slight. So in some way we have this freedom of not pursuing a scientific career, and we don't have to be so strongly influenced by their current opinions and procedures of the scientific world that could be extremely strict and
even sometimes misleading
and leading you in a very particular direction, which, I mean, it's quite all right if you're a scientist and you choose this path, but we are kind of an independent observers, but we mostly engage in the intellectual level of scientific pursuit. That's what interests us most. What is happening in the minds of the scientists, what new theories arise and what new interpretations of the world, and it's very small little isolated experiments or what is happening there. So I think it is very important for our society that not only scientists understand what is happening in science, because our society is so dependent on scientific interpretation of the world that if other people are not part of this pursuit, we will be disconnected from our own base. So
yeah, we think it has much to do with the path of humanity. There will certainly, or at least we very much hope, that a new category of thought beyond the purely scientific or philosophical or aesthetic will arise. But it is one that could not come to fruition if it weren't for the efforts of the many scientists, natural philosophers as they used to be called, and
Poets.
yes, it's a very combined and intertwined
Pursued.
yeah.